Welcome to Small Biz Life, episode 146, How the Wayfair Supreme Court Case Affects Small Online Businesses. All right, so I know that this case came out last week, and there's a lot of misinformation out there. There are a lot of people talking about this case who really don't know what they're talking about or don't understand the scope of the case. So if you are new to the show, if you've never listened before, I am a certified public accountant. I am also a tax professor. I teach a course on state and local taxes for the University of Hartford, which is an AACSB accredited business school. I have a master's in accounting and taxation with a focus in tax. And I've worked with small business owners for the last 17 years. This is kind of my niche. I help online businesses navigate multi-state tax. So this is one of my things. This is one of my areas of specialty. So
before you get going, let me come at this from the standpoint of someone who thinks Nexus is a program where they teach about how to create spacecraft online. And the first thing is, one, you should always have discussions with your accountant and lawyer or a tax attorney, specifically, about the specifics and how it can affect your company. This is generalized information, is not meant to be necessarily legal advice or accounting advice for your specific company, but they are really good words of warning. And the other thing is, and I think we have to get into is, a lot of times people who even understand the law pretty good have issues in tax law. And could you tell us why tax law varies from different types of law, just in your experience?
Okay, so, and again, I'm not a lawyer, right? I'm a tax person. And Jeff's absolutely right. So we're going to give you some general information, but you're going to have to talk to somebody about your specific situation, how this affects you. So first of all, tax law changes so quickly. And I think when we think about, the law, we're thinking about general state law. Most lawyers focus on either criminal law, divorce law, real estate law. Some do tax law. But this changes so quickly. And most tax attorneys that I know actually focus on federal tax law and not state tax law. And so, it's really important. I had somebody ask me today, or asked me yesterday, if I'm looking for a tax accountant, do I need somebody that's specific to my industry? And I said, the first thing you need to do is find somebody that is really keeping up with the changes. Mm-hmm. Right. And this is one of them, because I'm seeing a lot of people say, well, we're just going to wait to see what the states do. Well, the thing is, a lot of the states have already acted. Mm-hmm. Many states passed laws in the last 6 months to a year that said this law will go into effect if South Dakota wins the Wayfair case.
Yeah.
And so that triggered a whole bunch. Or a number of states wrote their laws so that they're very similar to South Dakota's law. And therefore, if the Supreme Court said South Dakota was okay, then they would be okay as well. Mm-hmm. Now, there's still going to be, I imagine there are going to be more court cases. There are going to be more challenges, especially to thresholds, and we're going to talk about some of those today. Okay, but
I do know, like they were saying, it was crap. That's your computer.
Yeah. We're recording a little bit later than we normally do, so that's my alarm that says time for lunch. So, there's going to be more challenges to this. There are going to be, especially about thresholds. But what I kind of want to do with this episode today is I want to get you to have enough knowledge so that you can ask the right questions when you go talk to a professional, and in your business when you need to go talk to that professional.
Yeah.
Right. So that's where I hope to get you today. Okay.
And realize too, by January 1st, there could be even more changes that happen between now and January 1st. And there might be new changes January 1st as well too.
Right. So there are I know that there are a number of changes that go into effect on July 1 of this year. There are a number of laws that have already been passed that go into effect in January of next year. And I would imagine that as states realize that, oh my God, we won, you're going to see more legislation passed. So let's start with the basics. So what was the Wayfair case? So back in 1992, the Supreme Court ruled that in order for a company to have presence in a state, and this was very important because if you have presence in a state, you have to collect sales tax and you have to pay income tax in that state. So what the state said is, or what the Supreme Court said is that for you to have presence in a state, it must be physical presence. This was the Quill case. And some of you might remember Quill office supplies from back in the day. Quill was sending computer disks into North Dakota. And North Dakota said, well, that's physical presence, right? You're mailing disks with catalogs. That gives you presence. And the Supreme Court said, no, you have to have physical presence, which means you have to have inventory, you need to have assets, you need to have employees, or you need to have like independent contractors in the state. And so now fast forward, in 2005, New York passed the first internet sales tax that said you do not need to have presence in our state. You don't need to have physical presence if you have affiliates in our state. And most of you that are in the online world, we define affiliates a little bit differently than the states do. So when the states talk about affiliates, they're talking about like multi-level marketing companies. Okay, so what they're basically saying is like if you have Avon sales representatives in our state, if you have, doTERRA representatives in our state, those are people who are selling on your behalf, and therefore you have to collect sales tax. States started requiring if you had click-through Nexus, that you would have to collect sales tax in the state. And that definition is expanded. So, and we'll talk about the specifics of the 4 different types. But what ended up happening is Wayfair ended up suing South Dakota because South Dakota said, you don't need to have any sort of connection to our state other than the fact that you're generating sales within our state. And we don't care where those sales are coming from. If you have $250,000 in sales in the state of, or $200,000 in sales in the state of South Dakota, or you have 200 sales per year, 200 transactions, this gives you presence in our state.
I think it was $100,000 in sales or 200.
Can you double check that for me?
Mm-hmm.
Because I know that there were states that had 100 and there were states that, I think you're right, I think it was 100.
Because that's the number people are saying. If you don't have that sales, you won't have to pay in other states, but that's not true.
Right. Right. So, and I'm sorry, because we were doing the research on this and we covered so many different states when we were doing it. And all the states have different levels. So Wayfair sued, they went up through the courts, they finally hit the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court said, because they said Quill is no longer practical, right? With internet businesses and people buying from companies all over the country, buying online, the physical presence requirement is no longer practical. States are losing out too much in sales tax. The estimate was up to $30 billion in sales tax revenue is lost due to online sales. And so the Supreme Court sided with South Dakota. The reason that we might see more challenges is that South Dakota has its threshold, which Jeff is confirming for me right now. And then, and have you found it yet?
Nope.
Okay, so he's still looking. So there's their threshold is relatively high. There are some states that their threshold is low. There are other states that are using a different basis. And we're going to talk about right now, there are 4 types of nexus that you've got to watch out for. Nexus means presence. It means connection. Okay. So the first type this is one of the older types, click-through nexus. Click-through nexus, yes.
It is $100,000 or 200 transactions.
Okay, 100,000 or 200 transactions. That's the benchmark that South Dakota used, and that's the benchmark that a lot of states used when they rewrote their laws. They figure, all right, what we're going to do is we're all going to write our laws similar to what South Dakota's doing, and then we'll all kind of piggyback off of the decision from South Dakota. But there are a lot of other thresholds that states are using. So the first thing is click-through nexus. Click-through nexus is when you have affiliates, and this is the online definition of affiliates, where if you have, like if you're an Amazon affiliate or you're a Wayfair affiliate, and so you put something on your website or you go to Facebook and say, hey, this is a really cool product, you should go buy it. And if somebody does, you get a percentage of the sale. It's called click-through because people are clicking through your content to get to Amazon, or they're clicking through your content to get to Wayfair. That's why it's called click-through nexus. So the threshold for that is all over the place. In Connecticut, it's $2,000 in sales. It's not $2,000 in affiliate payments, it's $2,000 in sales.
So if you have a $2,000 course, an affiliate sells one and gets, let's say, $1,000, you still have to pay for the one course.
Right.
Next to state Connecticut.
Right. So Connecticut's is very low. It's $2,000. This is probably going to get challenged. There are some states that have $10,000 in sales. So it doesn't matter what you pay the affiliates. If the affiliates generate $10,000 in sales, you need to collect sales tax in that state. The second type of nexus is what they call affiliate nexus, but this is your multi-level marketing companies, and most of the multi-level marketing companies have already, they already have an agreement with the states. But so if you sell Avon, if you sell any of the oils, if you sell anything via network marketing, multi-level marketing, you're collecting sales tax on those transactions. And typically the company is transmitting that for you. You're not going to be required to file that yourself, right? So that's kind of channeling up the company. States are always going to try to get the biggest player to pay the sales tax because it's much easier to go after Avon or doTERRA than it is to go after all of the individual reps that sell it. Okay, so that's why. The next type of nexus that you have to be concerned with is called economic nexus. This is the type of nexus that South Dakota uses and that a number of other states are starting to introduce. And many states will have multiple nexus laws. So they'll say, okay, economic nexus kicks in at this point, click-through nexus kicks in at this point, affiliate nexus exists, okay? And so they've got multiple laws. And so you got to kind of figure out with the states that you're working in, what is going to apply to you, okay? So economic nexus just means that you have sales in a state. So if you're selling online courses, you are going, if somebody buys from a state, you have a sale in that state. If you hit, for South Dakota, $100,000 in sales, you now have nexus in South Dakota. You need to collect sales tax in South Dakota if your products are taxable there. Okay, so the first level of this is just determining whether or not you have presence in the state. Then you've got to determine what's taxable. Okay, so the last type of economic nexus is called marketplace nexus. Marketplace nexus affects the big sites that help small sellers. So for most states, the definition of a marketplace is a site that provides a shopping cart, payment processing, and some type of customer support. So, for example, like Amazon Marketplace is a marketplace, right? They are the cart, they're the credit card processor, and they provide customer service. eBay is a marketplace. Etsy is a marketplace. And so actually eBay and Etsy are starting to fight back again and say we shouldn't be responsible for collecting sales tax for all of these sellers, because essentially what Marketplace Nexus says is that the marketplace itself is responsible for collecting the sales tax and transmitting it. And so now, kind of think about this. This is kind of problematic, right? It's going to be up to eBay or Etsy to figure out, okay, what are you selling? Is it taxable?
Mm-hmm.
And then figure out the sales tax. And on Etsy, people are selling patterns for things that are downloadable. They're selling physical patterns. They're selling instructions for how to do things. They're selling physical products. They're selling clothing. And so Etsy would have to be able to figure out exactly what every single item is and whether or not it's taxable. So the marketplaces are fighting back on that because they don't think they should be treated as one entity. They think that they should be treated as the individual sellers that are on their site.
Yeah.
So that's going to be really interesting to see what happens with that, because I think you're going to see eBay and Etsy sue based off of that.
Well, and I think, there are other companies that are kind of close but don't quite fit in, where you have your ClickFunnels, which don't really deal with the money and they don't do customer support for you. Kajabi is sort of the same thing. So you have areas like that, but you have a lot of content providers selling stuff through there, which might or might not be sales taxable. So I think one of the things to keep your eyes on is, do states start trying to modify marketplace to start including other players as well?
Right. So that's the thing is like right now, if you're using ClickFunnels or you're using something like Kajabi, those are not considered marketplaces because you're bringing in your own payment processor. They don't provide any support to your customers. And so I think, but at some point, the states are going to go, you know what? If they're on your platform, you're responsible for making sure they have the tools they need to collect sales tax. One thing that's kind of interesting, and I think that you guys need to watch out for this, there are a number of states, and Pennsylvania is one of them, that says, listen, your marketplace doesn't have to transmit the tax. They don't have to collect the tax. But if you decide not to collect the tax, you need to report all of the sales on your website that, from Pennsylvania, and then we're going to go after the purchasers on your site.
Yeah.
And so, right. So you have to be really careful with that. Most states have a use tax, and a use tax means that if you purchase something without sales tax, you're required to pay sales tax on your individual tax return.
And it's usually meant like if you're planning to use it in the state that you live, but not the state you purchased it from.
Right, exactly. So if you have transactions where you're not paying sales tax, you are legally required to pay that sales tax. And many states, I know Connecticut did this with a couple different retailers. You're required to pay the sales tax on that transaction, and companies, so that they don't have to bear the compliance costs, are turning that data over to the states. So be really careful about that. You may get a letter in the mail stating that you owe sales tax. So, and be careful with that, because there are scammers that are actually going out there and sending people letters that look like they're from the state, asking people to pay sales tax. So watch out, because it's actually a huge scam ring that's going on as well. You've got to be careful. Okay, so let's talk about what's taxable. I think a lot of people believe that digital products are not taxable. That's just not true. Mississippi is actually really funny. So Mississippi basically says that anything that can be sensed by your senses is taxable. So if you think about like, okay, if I sell a course that people can see, that's taxable. If I sell a downloadable product, that is taxable. Many states have their own definitions of what a what tangible property is, what downloads are. And so kind of what I would advise you to do if you are my client, and again, like you've got to talk to somebody about this. Okay. I would recommend that you start with the sales threshold part. So figure out where your sales are concentrated, where you might have presence. What we're doing with our funnels, because we actually have a funnel that's launching within the next couple weeks, is I'm collecting all of the state data. So I want to know the state or the country that everybody's buying from. And then I can start to run reports off of that, to make sure that we're not hitting those thresholds in any of those states. So once you've done that, right, and if you think that you're getting close to one of the thresholds, then you've got to start looking at what's taxable in those states. Mm-hmm. Don't just assume because you sell digital products that they're not taxable. Don't assume because you sell courses that they're not taxable.
Or if someone sells it for you as an affiliate, it's not taxable to you.
Right. The laws are changing very rapidly. The states have started to realize that this is a multiple $100 billion a year industry. Between the digital courses, the digital downloads, all the digital stuff that we're selling online. And states are starting to go, okay, if you multiply that by 7% or 8% or whatever our sales tax rate is, wow, that's a lot of money. So, states are broke, right? And so they are looking for any way to generate more income. And they've realized that, holy crap, there's a lot of commerce going on online that we didn't even realize. Mm-hmm. And as they start to figure that out, we are going to see more things subject to taxes.
And they're going to go after big buckets first. And, if you're a small, player, maybe even $1 million company or smaller, you might be able to survive for years. But when they catch up to you, I don't know how aggressively they're going to go after people. This is all completely new.
Right. And the thing, what they typically do, what I've seen in other industries is, for example, like they will go after a big insurance company and say, okay, tell us who all of your insurance brokers are. And then we want to know how much money they're making. And then they'll go after the insurance brokers. So typically what they'll do is they'll start with a bigger company. And once that bigger company gets on the radar, that they'll use their records to trickle down. Okay. And so my fear is that some of these bigger sites, like for example, like if they go to Etsy or they go to eBay, and say, all right, listen, if you don't want to be a marketplace, that's fine, but you have to report all the sales to us. Mm-hmm. Okay. And then we're going to use that to try to get the sales tax. Or they'll go to somebody like Kajabi or somebody like ClickFunnels and say, okay, we know that they're, ClickFunnels, I would imagine there are hundreds of millions of dollars of sales going through ClickFunnels pages. And so my fear is that they go to somebody like ClickFunnels and say, okay, we want a record, of all the sales that are going through your sites.
Or at least by people in our state. You screw with us, we're going to start putting liens to try and turn you into a marketplace, which will screw up your pricing structure. So, states are desperate for money. The feds are desperate for money. You're going to see people, and they'll go to the big players to get back to you. So pay attention to who you're using and what stuff you're using. So if you're using WooCommerce or ClickFunnels or whatever you're using, make sure to follow the news and what's going on with them, and if a state goes after them, make sure you know what's going on in that state, because it could get back to you.
Right. And the thing is too, and one thing that I'm kind of worried about, especially with digital products, so there were a lot of systems that do not require you to keep track of where people are located, right? So you don't have to keep track of the state they're buying from or the country they're buying from. And so what I worry about is a state like Connecticut comes to our business and says, hey, you have all these sales that you're saying are non-taxable on your tax return.
Mm-hmm.
Prove it. Right? So we want to know exactly where are these products being downloaded. And if you can't provide that information, it's all going to be taxable at your home state. And so you've got to make sure that you can prove where those sales are going.
Mm-hmm.
And
a lot of these rules too, for like amounts, that goes away if you live there.
Right. If it's your home state, there is no minimum threshold. So, we live in Connecticut. I do our sales tax return. Every month. And I say, okay, these are the sales in Connecticut. These are the sales outside Connecticut. And I've got the records to justify it. Every single one of our customers, I have the state that they're buying from. And I know like that decreases your conversions, but I don't want the state of Connecticut coming after me and saying, hey, we want 1% of all of your sales,
mm-hmm.
because you can't prove where they come from. So I know that, a lot of you, maybe your systems aren't set up for this right now. There's a company, we'll put the link in the live. If you can get the link for TaxJar, which should be in the show notes. TaxJar is one that has a lot of plugins. They have a plugin for Shopify. They have a plugin for WooCommerce.
It's not in the show notes.
Okay. All right. I'll get it later then. But
you put in Trello maybe?
It is in Trello. I do know that. But that's one that they have plugins for a lot of different systems. And so it's going to cost you a little bit per month. But it starts really low. I think it starts at like $19 a month. Some basic things you can do is if you're using something like ClickFunnels, make sure that you've got something coded in so that it identifies the state
mm-hmm.
that people are buying from. So you've got that information. You can, let's see. Yep. Thank you. So that's the link to TaxJar. Again, they've got lots of different plugins, and they can actually, if you think this is an issue for your business, they can also help guide you through registering with the different states. Because here's the thing. So if you have to report sales tax in states, that means you have to register in that state as well. So you're going to need a sales tax permit in that state. And that can get to be cumbersome. That is a service that TaxJar provides. So if you guys have any questions about this, you can, if you're watching on Facebook, you can leave a comment on the Facebook page.
Mm-hmm.
If you're in the Small Biz Life community on Facebook, you can ask questions there. You can leave a comment.
Video.
Yeah, you can leave a comment, right on the video. But this is something, I just want you to have enough information so you can decide whether or not this needs to be on your radar for your business. I think a lot of people believe this is an Amazon issue, this is a Wayfair issue, this is a big player issue, and that's not necessarily the case. So, especially, it is so easy to set up affiliate programs.
Mm-hmm.
Right. It is. And those are the click-through nexus is usually the lowest threshold of all of them.
Mm-hmm.
If you're selling a $2,000 course and you sell it to 5 people in a state, you probably have nexus in that state now. Okay. So there's a number of states that their threshold is as low as $10,000 for click-through nexus. So you really have to be careful with this. This has to be on your radar. And talk to somebody, if this is something that you're concerned about, sit down, with an accountant that understands this stuff and make sure that you get all your questions asked so that you can feel comfortable about it. Yeah. So I hope this really helps. If it did, please make sure you share this out, because I think this is something that's really not on the radar for a lot of small businesses. I think a lot of online businesses just assume like, hey, we're online, we don't sell anything tangible, no sales tax. And that is just not the case anymore. So thank you guys so much. And we will see you next week. Oh, actually, we won't see you next week. What we're going to do is we're actually going to record the show, and we will post it up in the Facebook page on Wednesday. But Wednesday is a holiday in the United States. And so we won't be live, but there will be a new video put up on Wednesday for you guys to watch.
And then for the normal people, it'll go out the following Monday. Same way like the show notes from this show will go live next Monday. The Monday after the videos are when you can go check out the show notes. But a lot of times, like any relevant links, you try and put in the comments below.
All right, awesome. So thank you guys so much, and we'll see you live in 2 weeks, and we'll have a new show out next week.